Hello. So I'm going to try to re-record this book review one last time because the other one was 30 minutes long and not as cohesive as I wanted it to be. So today I'm reviewing Ari and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, and it's going to be a negative review, just so you know, in case this is your favorite book. Beware. So I've been recommended this book multiple times over the years, and I finally saw it at a church rummage sale for $2, so I figured why not? I will pick it up, I'll check it out. I read through the whole thing in about 2 days, and I can tell you it was not necessarily because I loved the writing or the character voice, but it was mainly because I wanted to know what happens and why it happened, because the two big issues I had with this book from the beginning were I did not enjoy the character voice in this, and the second one was you're putting out all these little plot points that will hopefully have payoff in the end. I don't want to see how you pay them off or if they get paid off in general, because I feel like with the way this author is, maybe they wouldn't, and I was kind of right. I got answers to a bunch of questions that were posed throughout the book, but at the same time, I feel like it's that thing where you ask questions and they're answered in the least satisfying way possible. So those are my big problems with the book. I'm going to go into a few of the little plot points that I did not particularly enjoy and a few of the plot points that I think should have been tied up a little better. And then I am going to go into the big end plot point that I thought was handled so poorly that I got angry and almost put the book down and didn't pick it back up. So that's the general gist. Hopefully we can keep this under 30 minutes, but knowing me, I'm probably going to make it 40 minutes. So the premise of this book is that you have two characters. One is named Aristotle, the other one is named Dante, and they are both Mexican-American boys. They're teenagers throughout the book. Sorry, I keep moving a certain way, and then the camera flares because I am a broke and cannot afford an actual camera. So, anyway, they are friends. They meet during a summer. I know, very stereotypical, but whatever. And they bond. Spoilers from here on out, just so you know. I'm going to talk about the book in a very frank, candid way. So, like, if you hear about the last 2 chapters of the book, it's because I'm spoiling everything and complaining about it the whole way. So, you have Dante, who is fun and artsy. You have Ari, who is just a completely locked up, little emotionally unavailable little man. They meet, and it's in the summer, as I said 2 seconds ago, and Dante ends up having to move away because his dad's a professor, and they go to Chicago. Meanwhile, Ari stays in Texas and just hangs out and gets a job and lives his little boring man life. That's literally, I feel like that's the entire book. But there's more to it. So a plot point throughout the book in Ari's little story arc is the fact that his brother, who is 10 years older than him, is in jail. His parents never talk about his older brother. He doesn't remember him much. I think his name's Bernardo, and yeah, it's Bernardo. And it's him the entire book having to deal with his brother's absence in his life and how it feels like almost like a presence, like the absence itself is a presence, if that makes sense. He thinks about his brother all the time. He wants to remember him, but he really can't. And his parents have taken down all of the pictures of him from the house, and they just never really talk about what even happened, like what he did to wind up in jail. So there's that. And then you have Dante, who's on his little artsy boy fantasy arc where he goes to Chicago and he goes to a bunch of parties. He smokes, pot for the first time. He makes out with girls, and then he tries making out with boys. They don't really make it clear about, well, in my opinion, it's clear, but some people could argue, like, some people are like, no, he's definitely hardcore bisexual because he's making out with guys and girls. My question with that is, have you ever heard of comphet before? Apparently nobody has, so everyone automatically is like, oh, this person's making out with whoever, like, that means they're secretly bisexual. And I'm like, gonna be honest, I've kissed boys before. Guess what? I'm a dyke. So comphet got to me, and then I was like, that's not for me. And I know it can be either case where it's like you could, I don't know, kiss whoever you want and be like, you know what, it turns out I'm bi because I enjoyed all of it. Or you could kiss whoever the fuck you thought you had to kiss, and then you're like, oh, it turns out I'm gay or lesbian because, like, that just wasn't for me. But anyway, I think that he's gay because he, like, kisses a boy and he's like, oh my god, this is my life. And then, I don't know, after that, he's like, I think I want to get married to a man, like, forever. Like, that's gonna be me. Like, that's gonna be my life. So I don't know, at some point in the book, it's relevant, but it's not relevant because for some reason with this author, he lays out all this stuff that seems like it's going to be relevant, and then it turns out it isn't, which is my big problem with the book. Anyway, later, Ari brings up, he's like, oh, he likes kissing boys and girls. Wow, like that's him. He's wild. And it's like, okay, like whatever, I guess. Even though he literally directly told you in a letter, like, I'm going to marry a man. My future is a man. I love men. And it's like, that sounds very specific. But anyway, so all that happens with Dante's little character arc. And then you have Ari's character arc, which is literally just him running around being angsty, but also somehow a sexy hot man at the same time, which is confusing because they're like, he's just an angsty loner and like blah blah blah, and then it's like, oh, secretly all the girls are into him and like they all love him and they think he's fun and sexy, and then he kisses a girl even though the girl is supposedly like gang affiliated and pregnant now out of nowhere. I don't fucking know. So like the author does a lot of that where he brings up plot points and then he completely derails himself by being like, this plot point, just kidding, this plot point, but I'm not going to have any sort of build up or lead up or logical, like, we're going from point A to point B and it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of, we're going from point A to point F and you're going to hold on for the ride and that's just how life is anyway. That's crazy. And it's like, I feel like you could do the random jumps in a very specific way that's like, oh, it's reflecting real life, but I feel like instead it's done in a lazy way of like, oh, this is just happening and you're going to accept it because it's in the book anyway. And it's like, I guess we're going to accept it, supposedly. So there's all that occurring. That's the characters' little lives. And then the book progresses where Dante comes back and Dante's like, oh, I'm back, yay. And like Ari's like, I can't tell if I can even be friends with you anymore because I saved your life in an insane random car accident scenario that the author just decided to put in here for some reason. So sorry, it's not funny, it's kind of annoying, but yeah, so that happens where, long story short, there's a little bird in the street and Dante's like, I'm a sensitive little man, I'm gonna go save that bird even though it's raining, ha ha ha, manic pixie dream boy. So he goes out to get the bird and then a car whips around the corner and Dante, or sorry, I confuse both of them because they're, to me in my mind, they're one character, which I know is not how it's supposed to be because they're very different. But I feel like the author did this thing where he was like, oh, the concept of foil characters where both characters complete each other, let me do that, even though instead of having them be their own separate people with their own divine voices and their own specific likes and dislikes and interests and all this other stuff, we're going to make it so they're almost codependent on each other to exist, because that's how I feel. Anyway, moving on. And I said, okay, sir, I guess if that's what you want to do to me, you can do that. So I was a fool and continued to read. And anyway, Ari pushes Dante out of the way of the car and he gets very badly injured and it's like a whole thing. And to me, I just thought that was proof of like, he cares about him so much as a person and he has so many weird complexes about caring about people because the two men in his life, specifically his brother and his father, are so absent and far away from him that he's developed this relationship with yet another man in his life. Even in my opinion, it didn't read as romantic, and he doesn't know what to do because he's so scared of like letting people in and losing them. Like he's lost both his brother and essentially his father, because even though his father's present in his house and present in his life, he has a lot of PTSD as a veteran, so he just is never emotionally accessible at all. Anyway, continuing from that info dump, fucking Dante comes back and is like, you saved my life and I really like you as a person, and Ari's like, I don't know what to do with any of that, so I'm not going to deal with it, and they become kind of distant, but then they grow back together, which is great, awesome, whatever. Then something else that happens out of nowhere is Dante gets hate crimed. Like he's making out with another dude in an alleyway, and then, a bunch of guys from class find him and they beat him up, and the other kid runs away, and Dante doesn't run because he's like, and what, I'm gay, what are you gonna do about it? And the kids beat him up and it's really sad. And then Ari retaliates after the fact, after he finds out, and is like, listen, like, I'm gonna go beat the fuck out of these kids because they hurt you. So he goes and finds one of the kids and does like break his nose, and his parents are like, oh no, you're being violent, we're scared of the violence because your brother was so violent. And I feel like they could have gone into that more, but instead of going into it, they just decided to be like, by the way, we're going to talk more about your brother, we're going to start talking about him in general so you know who he is as a person. And you're like, okay, good, that was a big point of contention throughout the entire book. So that happens, okay, great, healing, but then you find out what his brother did, and this is what was the deal breaker for me in this book, because it turns out, big spoiler alert, just so you know, What his brother ended up doing that got him put in jail was, he was 15 years old. Like Bernardo or whatever was 15 years old, and he went out to find a sex worker. And he went and he found this person. I say person because they don't define who the person is in the book, even though in my opinion I feel like I know who this person was as another trans person. He finds a trans woman who is a sex worker, and he finds out that she's a trans woman and kills her. Literally, like, beats her to death. Like, it was a whole thing that they mention in a sentence, and it goes by like that. And I was horrified, naturally. I was like, that's what he did? Like, it makes sense why you don't talk about him anymore, because, like, that's fucking disgusting and terrible. Like, he's, like, literally a murderer. And then apparently when he was in jail, like, he was in, like, juvenile detention, he killed another person. Because it sounds like he has rage issues. Which it could just be him as a person, or it could have stemmed from his whole family situation where they just bottle everything up and he didn't know what to do with his feelings, and he literally just kills people now. So he's now killed 2 people. He's killed another child, and he has killed a trans woman who is a sex worker. And in the book they keep being like, oh, she's a transvestite, like, haha, like, it was just a transvestite. It's like, I feel like the way that I am seeing it and the way that it sounds, it's not just, oh, it was a man dressed as a woman who was doing sex work. Like, no, it's straight up like, it just sounds like it was a trans woman who was doing sex work and then she got murdered. And I don't like how that was handled, because they kept being like, oh, that's crazy. Like, so essentially, by their, like, logic, like, this woman experienced a hate crime, but as, like, a man, even though, like, once again, like, to me, like, I don't think she was a man. I think she was a sex worker who is also trans. And sorry, it made me so angry when I read it. They treat it like Ari and Dante, when they're talking about it, kind of treat it like, oh, that sucks, but it's fine. And then, like, Ari's like, but I'm still going to talk about my brother, and I'm still so excited to get to know him. And I'm like, you just tried to, like, essentially, like, retaliate for your best friend, the fact that he got hate crimed. Like, he got beaten up for being gay. And then you want to turn around and be like, oh, when my brother beats people up for being gay, it's fine, and I'm going to talk to him, and we're going to be best friends again, and I'm going to get to know him as a person. It's like, how can you work that double standard where you yourself now, spoiler alert, once again, he figures out he's gay at the end of the book, even though I feel like it's like it came out of nowhere, in my opinion. Like, they tried to make it seem like he cares about his gay best friend, so, like, that means he's gay and he has gay feelings. It's like, I don't think that's how it works at all, but, like, whatever, that's a whole thing. That is not my problem, because I'm done with the book. I don't want to read it again. But, like, I don't know. I just don't understand how you can, once again, defend your best friend for being physically attacked, essentially, for being gay. But then it's totally cool with you that, like, your brother attacked somebody for trying to make him be gay and killed her. Like, he killed that woman. Or in their mind, they killed that man. Like, how can you do that? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. Because to me, it's like the same thing. It's like, okay, so if those boys had, like, finished the fucking job and murdered Dante, it would be fine with you, and you would, like, it would be cool, and, like, it wouldn't matter. And you, like, it would still be like, oh, well, like, those guys have families, so it's okay. Like, no. Like, that's unacceptable to me. That's something that pissed me off really badly. I hated that part of the book. And it was at the very end, and, like, I think the pacing of the romance was very poor, and there were so many different opportunities you could have written in the fact that Ari felt something, like, genuinely felt something when Dante was doing all this romantic stuff, or that he was, like, really struggling with his sexuality, but instead you had him entirely just struggling with his brother, which I feel like, okay, fine, but you could have woven the two together, or you could have had it be, like, a separate struggle that he was still going through. Because as far as I could tell, it was literally just him, like, being a dumbass and trying to be into girls, and, like, being into girls, but it was, like, a whole thing. It just really bothered me. The 2 things I forgot to mention in the last time I did takes of this review is, there's part of the book that mentions the fact, not very well, Ari has a gay aunt. Ari has a lesbian aunt who he had to stay with when the brother's trial was happening, because the parents were like, you cannot be in the house when all this is going on. Like, you need to go visit your aunt, and stay with her in her house, with her wife, essentially, because we just don't want you involved, which makes sense. I wish they could have put more of the aunt in there, and I wish they could have had her as kind of even like using her as almost somebody else who he was really, really close with and who could understand his actions, or maybe even seen as he was growing up, like, oh, you might be gay as well. Like, okay. I think that could have been cool, because it would have been somebody else who's also, you know, LGBT, being like, okay, we have an understanding. Like, even if I'm not like expressly bringing up like, oh, I think you're gay, like you're a little boy and you're gay, like it could have been like, I see that you're more sensitive, I see that you're more, you know, compassionate, whatever else, like I see that you are different, and I support you in that, and I want you to be happy in that, and I want you to know you can still be yourself, and your parents will still love you even if you are different. They will love you no matter what, you know, even that kind of thing. But it's like, once again, my big issue with this book is it lacked so much nuance, and it lacked so much development, and it did so much telling instead of doing a lot of showing. So like, there were a lot of things like that just, to me, it was lost opportunities. It was so much time wasted on certain things, and it was time wasted being like, I feel angry, and because my brother, I feel angry because of this, I'm angry, I'm moody, haha, my parents think I'm so fun and sarcastic. Like, a lot of saying instead of like showing through dialogue or showing through actions, like what's going on. The last thing that I forgot to mention is the fact that this is really annoying. This really annoys me. So Dante gets hate crimed. Literally, like, I say it as a joke a lot, but I'm serious in this context. He does get beaten up for being gay, to the point where it almost kills him, honestly. And his father calls Ari in and is like, what happened? Like, I'm sure you know what happened, because you're best friends with my son, even though you've been avoiding him, even though you've been, you know, staying away from him for the most part. Like, and things are different between you, and I can tell. I need you to tell me what happened to my son, because he's in the hospital again. Like, or not again, sorry. I forgot. This is terrible. I forgot that the two different characters were in the hospital. I literally thought I was just one of them, because in my mind they're one person, because they almost can't exist without each other. Not in a fun, romantic, sexy way. In like this fucking narrative is falling apart at the seams way. So the father's like, what happened to my son? Like, what happened to him? You know. And I like you, and you guys are friends, so what happened? And Ari's like, did you know that he's gay? And I'm laughing because it pissed me off. I was just like, don't do this to him. Like, did you just out him? Like, did I read that right? Like, this is fucked. You didn't just out him, right? And the dad's like, oh? That's literally his reaction. He's like, oh? And he's like, yeah, your son's gay, dude. Like, your son is gay. It's who he is as a person. The dad's like, I always suspected. And I was just like, shut up, Mr. Dante's dad. I fucking even forget your last name because I don't care about you that much. I think his name was Steve or something. It's probably not Steve. It's probably something completely different, and I just messed that up. I don't care. His name's Steve now. So Dante's dad, Steve, is like, what? I always suspected, but I didn't know. It's like, you didn't know. Okay, sure. Because he's very much, once again, like, manic pixie dream boy, like, classic, like, stereotypical, like, I'm smart and I'm skinny and I just am bad socially, and like, I'm so smart and sarcastic, like, I'm like, look at me, I'm a gay boy, like, ha. And it's just like, okay, we get it. So yeah, all of that to say, Ari outs his best friend to his father, because his father's like, did my son get hate crimed? And he's like, he sure did. And then like, that happens. So why did that need to happen? Like, why did he need to out his best friend to his dad? I respect when in the narrative, the character who's like, is my son gay? And like, the person answering is usually like, I think that you should ask him that, because I think that you don't need to hear it from me, you know, like, but no, they had him totally out his friend, and his friend was in the hospital, like, just fucked up, like, oh, like, and you outed him, like, why did you? So I just think so many things in this book, every single gay part of this book was just fumbled so terribly, handled so badly, that I just never want to read it again. It pisses me off that so many gay people told me to read this. and were like, it's a great book, like, it's my favorite. And I'm like, shut up. Like, this book is fucking terrible. Sorry for your loss. Like, literally, like, I can never read this again because it was too much. It's too much to go through. I might just even give this back to the Goodwill because I just don't even want to, like, read it again because it was too much going on. Not in a good way, like, in an annoying way. That was like, why did I just waste an entire day and a half of my life? So, would I recommend this book to anybody? No, I wouldn't. Are people still going to read it? Yeah, of course they are, because everyone keeps saying how great it is. And it's, like, if it was ever adapted, I don't think it should be a series. I think it should just be a movie. And I know they're probably going to adapt it at some point because they love to do that. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention very, very quickly before it turns into another 30 minutes is they keep bringing up the theme of what a real Mexican is and, like, who a real, like, Mexican person is versus a Mexican American, and if you're just too American to be Mexican and all that other stuff. And naturally, Ari's supposed to be like the darker skinned one who's like tougher and like more brooding and all this other stuff. And they made Dante the lighter skinned person who's like, I don't know, just intellectual and smart and cool or whatever. But the thing is, I feel like the way they went about it is they never really resolved who's the real whatever. But because they never talked about the fact that it's like, you can both be Mexican and be that way. Like, you don't have to fit a certain, like, mold or a certain whatever. Like, same way that you don't have to fit a certain mold and then you're gay. Like, once again, like, they tried to make it seem like Dante was the less Mexican, more gay one. And that Ari was the more Mexican because he was, like, emotionally constipated or whatever and, like, darker. But, like, less gay one. And it really bothered me just because I was like, dude, like, they can both be, like, gay and Mexican. And also not for nothing, like, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that both of their families, like, the whole thing was that both of their grandparents came to America and at the same time, and they are both, like, equally, whatever way you want to put it, like, they're both Mexican. They're also both Mexican American because they grew up in Texas. So it's just like, what are you trying to say? And, like, once again, it's the whole trap of what are you trying to say of this entire book? Of, like, they fall into, like, the hole every single time where it's like, what are you actually trying to say about these characters? What do they actually want? Where is this actually going? And I feel like I couldn't come up with an answer for you. Other than the whole, like, oh, I wanted to know about my brother and why he was in prison, and now I want to talk to him. And it's like, okay, you finally found out what he did, and to me, what he did is unforgivable. So I don't know why you're running around being like, I still want to write him letters. Maybe he'll talk to me. It's like, bitch, like, don't do that. Like, literally, like, your brother did exactly what you were trying to prevent from happening to your boyfriend now. You're, like, your best friend. So, like, what are you talking about? I don't know. It just, like, all of it made me really mad. So I don't want to read this book again. And I don't think you should read this book. But if you do, whatever. I wanted to do this review because the thing is, like, I feel like there's probably so many different reviews of it being like, it's so good and interesting and phenomenal, everybody should read it. And then people like me read it and I'm like, bitch, what the fuck was this book? Like, are you kidding me? So I don't know, it's up to you whether you want to read it or not. I support you, but also, like, what do you think of this book? I bet a lot of people are gonna be like, it's my favorite book, it changed my life. And I'm gonna be like, all right, dude, rip, please read better books. That's all I have to say, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.